Most people don't lose because they lack talent. They lose because they can't stay calm when life pulls on them from every direction. Emotion hijacks their focus. Pressure controls their reactions. Chaos decides who they become. This audiobook is about reclaiming that control. Not by escaping stress, but by mastering yourself inside it. Because the person who stays calm when everything is pulling them is the person who cannot be defeated. Chapter 1. Calm is not personality, it is training. Most people think calm is a personality trait. They think you're either naturally calm or you're not. That belief is comfortable. And it's wrong. Calm is not personality. Calm is training. You weren't born reactive. You were conditioned that way. You weren't born unstable. You practiced instability without realizing it. Every time you panicked, rushed, over-explained, snapped, avoided, or collapsed emotionally, you trained your nervous system to repeat that response. That's the key. What you repeat, you become. And here's the part most people don't want to hear. You don't get calm by wanting it. You don't get calm by understanding it. You don't get calm by talking about it. You get calm by practicing it under discomfort. You have a choice. Every moment of tension gives you a fork in the road. React emotionally or stay disciplined. Collapse inward or stay steady. Let the moment train weakness or train control. Most people don't see these moments as training. They see them as interruptions, annoyances, unfair situations. That's why they keep failing the same emotional tests. Calm is not what you do when life is quiet. Calm is what you do when life is loud, unfair, rushed, and disrespectful. That's the only time calm actually counts. Think about pressure, deadlines, conflict, criticism, uncertainty. These moments don't create who you are. They reveal what you've practiced. You don't rise to your intention under pressure. You fall to your training. Say that again. You don't rise to intention. You fall to training. That's why people who know better still lose control. Because knowledge doesn't run the body under stress. Training does. Calm is conditioned. If your default reaction is tension, defensiveness, or panic, it's not because you're broken. It's because that reaction has been rehearsed more times than calm ever has. And repetition always wins. You have to stop romanticizing calm as a mindset and start treating it like a muscle. Muscles grow through resistance. Calm grows through discomfort. That means when your heart rate rises, you don't rush to fix the feeling. You stay with it. You breathe slower than the situation demands. You move deliberately when everything urges speed. That's training. When someone provokes you and you feel the urge to respond immediately, and you don't, that's training. When anxiety tells you to escape, explain, justify, or control outcomes, and you stay grounded, that's training. Most people never train calm. They only practice relief. They calm down after the threat passes, after the argument ends, after the email is sent, after the deadline is over. That's not calm. That's recovery. Calm is staying regulated while the threat is still present. That's the difference between someone who looks calm and someone who is calm. You don't need perfect conditions to practice this. You need imperfect ones. Traffic, waiting rooms, delays, rejection, silence, disrespect. These are not inconveniences. They are your gym. But only if you use them correctly. You have a choice. You can treat every stressful moment as proof that life is against you. or you can treat it as a repetition for emotional discipline. That's the key. Calm doesn't arrive all at once. It's layered, built, reinforced. At first, you'll only notice the moment after you reacted. Then you'll catch yourself halfway through reacting. Eventually, you'll feel the surge and choose not to follow it. That gap is everything. That gap is where discipline lives. And discipline is not about suppression. It's about direction. You don't eliminate emotion. You govern it. Emotion is energy. Discipline decides where it goes. Say it clearly. Emotion speaks. Discipline decides. Most people let emotion vote. You don't. You don't need their permission to stay calm. You don't need validation. You don't need agreement. Calm is internal authority. And authority comes from consistency, not intensity. One calm reaction doesn't change you. 100 small ones do. That's why waiting for a big breakthrough is a trap. Identity is shaped quietly, in boring moments, in private moments, in moments no one applauds. That's the key. If you only practice calm when it's easy, you haven't practiced at all. Real calm is trained when your ego feels threatened, when time feels tight, when outcomes feel uncertain. That's when the nervous system learns a new rule. I don't panic here anymore. And once the body learns that, the mind follows. Calm is conditioned. You must also understand this. You will feel uncomfortable training calm. If it felt natural, you'd already have it. Discomfort is not a sign you're doing it wrong. It's proof you're retraining something deeply ingrained. Most people quit right there. They mistake discomfort for danger. They mistake tension for failure. That's why they stay reactive for decades. You don't. You stay. You breathe. You slow your movements. You lower your voice. You reduce unnecessary words. Not to look calm, but to become calm. Because identity follows behavior. Act calm long enough and calm becomes automatic. That's the discipline. And once calm becomes automatic, something changes. Life stops controlling you. Other people stop pulling your strings. Pressure loses its leverage. Because you're no longer improvising emotional responses. You're executing trained ones. You have a choice. You can keep hoping stress will stop showing up. Or you can become someone stress doesn't destabilize. That's the work. And this is just the beginning. Because once you understand that calm is trained, not gifted, you're ready for the next truth. It's not just stress that pulls you off center. It's your reactions to people, words, and situations. And that's where most damage actually happens. You've learned that calm is conditioned. Now let's talk about what really costs you outcomes. Chapter 2. Emotional reactivity is the real loss. Most people think they lose because of what happened to them. The argument, the mistake, the delay, the rejection, the unexpected pressure. That's not where the loss happens. The real loss happens after, in the emotional reaction that follows. That's the key. What happens to you is often neutral. What you do emotionally in response is what creates damage. Reaction creates regret. Not immediately, not always visibly, but consistently. People don't usually lose in one dramatic moment. They leak control over time, minute by minute, decision by decision. And almost every leak starts with emotional reactivity. A sharp email triggers defensiveness. A setback triggers panic. A delay triggers frustration. Silence triggers insecurity. And suddenly, the person is no longer thinking clearly. They're reacting. You have a choice. Every emotionally charged moment asks you a simple question. Will you react or will you respond? Reaction is fast. Response is deliberate. Reaction is emotional momentum. Response is controlled direction. Most people don't notice when they cross that line, because reaction feels justified. That's what makes it dangerous. When you react, it feels right in the moment. You feel heard. You feel expressive. You feel relieved. But relief is not progress. Reaction burns energy without creating outcomes. That's the key. Look at your past regrets closely. The messages you wish you hadn't sent. The words you wish you could take back. The decisions you rushed into. The bridges you burned. Very few came from calm response. Almost all came from emotional reaction. Reaction narrows vision. It shortens time horizons. It trades long-term outcomes for short-term emotional discharge. And that trade is almost always a loss. Most people don't lose at the moment of failure. They lose hours earlier, days earlier, sometimes weeks earlier. They lose the moment they surrender emotional control. Once emotion takes the wheel, logic becomes a passenger. And logic never wins that fight. That's why reacting feels powerful, but produces weak results. You don't need their permission to stay composed. You don't need to get it off your chest. You don't need to prove your point emotionally. Those urges are traps. You have a choice. You can let emotion dictate your timing, your tone, your words. Or you can pause long enough to choose a response that serves you. That pause is everything. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It can be one breath, 1 second, one moment of restraint. But that moment interrupts the chain reaction. And once the chain is broken, you regain leverage. That's the key. Responding doesn't mean you're passive. It means you're precise. Responding doesn't mean you suppress emotion. It means you refuse to let it drive. Emotion is allowed to exist. It is not allowed to command behavior. Say it clearly. I don't react. I respond. Reaction is uncontrolled honesty. Response is intentional truth. Reaction speaks to be heard. Response speaks to be effective. Most people confuse emotional expression with strength. They think restraint is weakness. That belief keeps them reactive for life. Calm responders don't lose intensity. They gain accuracy. They choose when to speak, how to speak, and whether speaking helps at all. And often, silence is the strongest response available. When you react, you give the situation more power than it deserves. You let it set your internal state. When you respond, you reverse that equation. You decide the terms. That's internal authority. And authority compounds. One controlled response leads to another. Confidence grows. Clarity sharpens. Soon, you notice something important. Fewer things trigger you. Not because life got easier, but because your threshold got stronger. That's training. Most people want emotional peace without emotional discipline. They want calm outcomes while staying reactive internally. That's impossible. You can't live a stable life with unstable reactions. Every reactive moment trains the nervous system to expect chaos. Every deliberate response trains it to expect control. Calm is conditioned. So is reactivity. You are always training something. The question is what? You have a choice. The next time something provokes you, don't answer immediately. Don't explain. Don't justify. Create space. Space between stimulus and response is where power lives. That's not theory. That's practice. And practice changes identity. When you stop reacting, people notice. Situations change. Dynamics shift. Not because you forced them, but because you stopped feeding chaos with emotional energy. Reaction escalates. Response stabilizes. That's the key. And here's the part most people miss. You don't need to win every moment emotionally. You need to win the outcome. Reactive people win arguments and lose futures. Disciplined people lose arguments and win lives. Because they're not playing the same game. They're not trying to feel right. They're trying to be effective. That's discipline. Say it again. I don't react. I respond. Make it automatic. Make it boring. Make it default. Not once. Not when it's convenient. But especially when it's uncomfortable. Because discomfort is where reaction hides. And once you master response under discomfort, something else becomes clear. Emotional reactivity isn't just loud reactions. The subtle ones too. The tension, the rushing, the overthinking, the need to control outcomes. Which leads us to the next layer of discipline. You've learned that reacting is the real loss. Now it's time to stop negotiating with the very thing that causes it. Chapter 3. Stop negotiating with your feelings. Most people don't realize this, but they spend their entire lives negotiating with their feelings. I don't feel ready. I don't feel confident. I don't feel motivated. I don't feel calm yet. So they wait. And while they wait, nothing changes. That's the key. Feelings are information. They are not commands. But most people treat them like authority. If the feeling says stop, they stop. If the feeling says avoid, they avoid. If the feeling says react, they react. That's not self-awareness. That's emotional obedience. And obedience to emotion always weakens execution. You have a choice. You can let feelings vote on your behavior, or you can let discipline decide. High performers don't eliminate feelings. They just stop negotiating with them. They move forward even while fear protests. They stay calm even while anxiety argues. They stay disciplined even while emotion demands relief. That's not coldness. That's control. Emotion speaks. Discipline decides. Most people reverse that order. They wait until they feel calm to act calmly. They wait until they feel confident to move forward. They wait until they feel ready to commit. That waiting is the trap. Because feelings change after behavior, not before. Confidence follows action. Calm follows restraint. Clarity follows movement. Never the other way around. Negotiating with feelings sounds reasonable. It sounds healthy. It sounds compassionate. But in practice, it turns into delay, avoidance, and inconsistency. And inconsistency kills outcomes. That's the key. Every time you ask your feelings for permission, you give away authority. You tell your nervous system, you're in charge. And the nervous system doesn't care about long-term goals. Cares about comfort and safety. So it will always vote against discomfort, against pressure, against growth. Which means if you negotiate with emotion, emotion will always win. You don't need their permission. You don't need to feel calm to breathe slowly. You don't need to feel confident to stand upright. You don't need to feel motivated to act with discipline. You act first. The feeling catches up later. That's how training works. Think about how people actually fail. They don't fail because emotion shows up. Emotion always shows up. They fail because emotion decides. Fear decides they don't speak. Anger decides they lash out. Anxiety decides they rush. Doubt decides they quit. And afterward, they justify it. I had a bad day. I was overwhelmed. I was stressed. Those aren't explanations. They're excuses that protect the habit. High performers don't deny emotion. They override it. They say, I hear you, but you're not driving. That's the discipline. Emotion speaks. Discipline decides. This is especially important when it comes to calm. Because calm is not a feeling you wait for. It's a behavior you execute. Slow breathing is not a feeling. It's an action. Lowering your voice is not a feeling. It's a choice. Pausing before responding is not emotional. It's mechanical. And mechanics beat mood every time. That's the key. When you negotiate with feelings, you add friction to every decision. Life becomes heavier. Everything requires emotional readiness. When you stop negotiating, execution becomes simple. Not easy. Simple. You decide in advance who's in charge. And once that decision is made, moments of stress lose their leverage. Most people think discipline is rigid. It's not. Discipline is freeing. Because it removes internal debate. No arguing with yourself. No emotional bargaining. No waiting for the right state. You just do what the moment requires. That's calm power. And here's the truth most people avoid. If you only act when you feel good, you're training fragility. You're teaching your system that discomfort means stop. That's dangerous. Because life doesn't care how you feel. Deadlines don't adjust. Pressure doesn't wait. Consequences don't pause. High performers understand this early. They build systems that function despite emotion. They don't rely on motivation. They rely on identity. I am someone who executes regardless of mood. That's not harsh. That's reliable. You have a choice. The next time a feeling rises, don't ask it what to do. Ask yourself, what does discipline require right now? Then do that. Even if emotion protests, especially if it protests. Because protest means you're retraining something. Calm is conditioned. So is discipline. Every time you act without emotional permission, you strengthen internal authority. Every time you wait for a feeling, you weaken it. That's the key. You might notice discomfort at first. Tension. Resistance. Good. That means the old pattern is being challenged. Most people retreat there. They think something is wrong. Nothing is wrong. You're just no longer negotiating. And when you stop negotiating, something shifts. Emotion becomes quieter. Not because you suppressed it, but because it learned it's not in charge. Children stop screaming when they realize it doesn't work. Emotions do the same. They test boundaries. Discipline is the boundary. Emotion speaks. Discipline decides. Say it again. Slowly. Clearly. Emotion speaks. Discipline decides. Once this becomes your default, calm becomes easier. Not effortless, but automatic. Because there's no debate left. And once there's no debate, pressure loses another weapon. You've learned to stay calm. You've learned not to react. You've learned to stop negotiating with feelings. Now it's time to see what pressure actually does when discipline is missing. Because pressure doesn't break people. It reveals them. Chapter 4. Pressure reveals who is unprepared. Most people blame pressure for their collapse. They say pressure changed them. They say stress made them different. They say the situation was too much. That's not true. Pressure doesn't change you. It reveals you. That's the key. Pressure doesn't create chaos. It exposes the lack of internal structure. When everything is calm, anyone can look composed. When demands increase, time compresses, and stakes rise, only what's been trained remains. Pressure exposes training gaps. Think about the moments you lost control. The snapping, the rushing, the emotional shutdown, the panic decisions. Those weren't caused by pressure. They were caused by unpreparedness. Pressure didn't invent the reaction. It uncovered it. You don't rise under pressure. You fall to the level of your training. Say it again. Pressure exposes training gaps. Most people build their identity in comfort. They behave well when nothing is required of them. They feel disciplined when life is quiet. But comfort doesn't test structure. It hides weakness. That's why collapse feels sudden. People say, "I don't know what happened." What happened is simple. The structure wasn't there. Calm collapsed because it was never trained under load. You have a choice. You can resent pressure, or you can use it as a diagnostic tool. Pressure shows you exactly where discipline is missing. Not in theory, in practice. Where did your breathing change? Where did your posture collapse? Where did your tone sharpen? Where did your thoughts spiral? Those are not failures. They are feedback. Pressure is honest. It doesn't lie to protect your self-image. It shows you the truth of your conditioning. That's the key. People who fear pressure are protecting illusion. People who seek pressure are building reality. Because pressure removes performance. It reveals behavior, and behavior reveals identity. When calm collapses, it means calm was situational. When focus breaks, it means focus was fragile. When discipline disappears, it means it was conditional. High performers understand this early. They don't train when it's convenient. They train when it's uncomfortable. They intentionally put themselves under controlled stress. Hard conversations, tight deadlines, difficult environments. Not to suffer, but to expose gaps while stakes are low. Because unexposed gaps become liabilities later. That's the discipline. Most people do the opposite. They avoid pressure. They avoid confrontation. They avoid stress. And in doing so, they protect weakness. Then one day, pressure arrives uninvited. And everything falls apart. That's not bad luck. That's delayed feedback. Pressure exposes training gaps. Calm that only exists in easy moments is not calm. It's rest. Real calm is structural. It holds shape under weight. Like a bridge. A bridge doesn't prove strength on an empty road. Proves strength under load. Pressure is load. And load reveals design flaws immediately. If your structure collapses, the solution isn't to curse the weight. It's to reinforce the structure. You don't need their permission to take pressure seriously. You don't need to feel ready. You need to observe. When pressure hits, don't judge yourself. Study yourself. Notice what fails first. Is it breathing? Decision-making? Impulse control? Focus? Those are your training priorities. That's the key. Pressure is not an enemy. It's a mirror. And mirrors don't care how you feel. Most people look away. High performers adjust. They rebuild in private so they don't collapse in public. Calm trained in private becomes automatic under pressure. Calm practiced only in theory disappears instantly. That's why identity matters more than intention. You intended to stay calm, but intention doesn't survive stress. Training does. Pressure exposes training gaps. Say it until it sticks. Pressure exposes training gaps. Every breakdown contains instructions. If you're willing to read them, if your voice rises, train slower speech. If your mind races, train breath control. If your hands fidget, train stillness. If you rush decisions, train pauses. Simple, not easy, but effective. And once you start training what pressure exposes, something changes. Pressure loses its shock value. It becomes familiar, predictable. You stop fearing it because you've met it before. That's the difference between collapse and composure. Most people want confidence without testing. That confidence is imaginary. Real confidence comes from knowing you've been here before, and you didn't break. That knowledge can't be faked. Pressure gives it to you. If you let it, you have a choice. The next time pressure hits, don't ask, "Why is this happening?" Ask, "What is this showing me?" Then train that again and again and again, because repetition closes gaps. And once gaps close, pressure changes roles. It stops exposing weakness and starts sharpening strength. You've learned that pressure reveals unpreparedness. Now it's time to learn how to stop feeding pressure with unnecessary reactions. Because one of the greatest tools of calm is something most people overlook. Stillness. Chapter 5. Silence is a competitive advantage. Most people talk too much. They explain too fast. They respond too quickly. They fill every gap with noise. And they think that noise is power. It's not. Silence is. That's the key. Calm people don't rush to speak. They don't rush to react. They don't rush to fill space. They wait. They observe. They decide. And in that pause, they gain leverage. Stillness protects power. Most people leak power through their mouth, through over-explaining, through justifying, through emotional commentary that reveals more than it should. They speak to relieve tension, not to create outcomes. That's the mistake. When you speak emotionally, you give away information. You reveal uncertainty. You expose insecurity. You show your internal state. And once your internal state is visible, it can be used. Silence prevents emotional leakage. That's why it's uncomfortable for most people. Because silence removes their usual coping mechanism. Talking feels like control. Silence feels like exposure. But that feeling is backwards. Talking often reduces control. Silence consolidates it. You have a choice. When pressure rises, you can rush to be understood. Or you can stay quiet long enough to understand. Most people choose the first. That's why they miss details. They miss leverage. They miss timing. Calm people choose the second. They see more because they're not busy reacting. That's the key. Silence slows the situation down. It forces others to reveal themselves. Creates asymmetry. The person who speaks less often controls the frame. Not by manipulation, but by restraint. Think about arguments, negotiations, high-stress conversations. The first person to emotionally explain usually loses position. They reveal urgency. They reveal attachment. Silence does the opposite. Silence communicates stability, confidence, self-governance, without saying a word. Stillness protects power. Most people fear silence because they think it means weakness. They think if they don't respond, they lose ground. In reality, silence is ground. It buys time. It buys clarity. It buys choice. And choice is power. When you react instantly, you give the situation control over your timing. When you pause, you take it back. You don't need their permission to be quiet. You don't need to fill the space. You don't need to prove anything in real time. Urgency is rarely required. It's usually emotional. Silence removes urgency. That's the key. Calm people speak less because they don't need constant reassurance. They don't need to manage perception through words. They trust their presence. They also understand something most people don't. Not every thought deserves a voice. Not every feeling deserves expression. Not every reaction deserves airtime. Silence filters impulse. It separates what's felt from what's useful. Most people skip that filter. They say whatever shows up internally. That's why they regret things later. Silence creates a buffer between emotion and action, a buffer between stimulus and response. And that buffer changes everything. Stillness protects power. This doesn't mean you never speak. It means you speak deliberately. When you do speak, your words carry more weight because they're rare, measured, controlled. People listen differently to someone who doesn't talk constantly. They lean in. They pay attention. Not because you demanded it, but because silence creates gravity. That's authority. Most people chase authority through volume, through dominance, through force. Calm people let silence do the work. And here's the part most people overlook. Silence also protects you, prevents you from committing emotionally before clarity arrives, prevents you from saying something you can't undo, prevents you from escalating situations unnecessarily. Silence is defensive and offensive at the same time. It shields you from mistakes and pressures others to reveal theirs. That's the key. Think about how many problems in your life were made worse by words. Emails sent too fast. Messages written emotionally. Explanations offered too early. Words spoken to release tension. That created more tension. Silence would have prevented most of that damage. Not forever. Just long enough. Stillness protects power. This is especially important when you're calm under pressure. Silence allows calm to stabilize. Talking often destabilizes it. When you're under stress, your nervous system is already activated. Speaking quickly adds fuel. Pausing lets the system settle. That's not weakness. That's regulation. And regulation is strength. You have a choice. The next time you feel the urge to speak immediately, pause. Ask yourself one question. Does speaking right now increase my leverage or decrease it? If the answer isn't clear, stay silent. That's discipline. And discipline compounds. At first, silence will feel awkward. People may pressure you to respond, to explain, to react. Let them. Discomfort doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you're not feeding the usual dynamic. Silence changes dynamics. People reveal more. They talk themselves into corners. They show their urgency, while you stay grounded. Stillness protects power. Over time, silence becomes natural. Not forced. Not performative. Just calm presence. And once silence becomes part of your identity, something shifts internally. You stop feeling pulled by every stimulus. You stop feeling obligated to react. You stop bleeding energy through words. Your calm deepens. Because calm isn't just what you feel. It's what you don't do. You don't rush. You don't interrupt. You don't explain unnecessarily. You let moments breathe. That breathing space is where control lives. You've learned how calm works. You've learned not to react. You've learned to stop negotiating with feelings. You've learned what pressure exposes. You've learned the power of silence. Now it's time to address a dangerous misunderstanding. Because many people think calm means detachment from life. They think stepping back emotionally means not caring. That belief keeps them either reactive or numb. There's a better way. And it starts with understanding the difference between detachment and apathy. Chapter 6. Detachment is not apathy, it is control. Most people misunderstand detachment. They think detachment means not caring. They think it means being cold, distant, or disengaged. That misunderstanding keeps them trapped. Because what they're really afraid of is losing emotional attachment. The very thing that keeps them unstable. That's the key. Detachment is not apathy. Detachment is control. It means you stay engaged without being emotionally entangled. You show up fully, but you don't get pulled under. Most people don't realize how attached they are until something threatens the outcome. They need the result. They need approval. They need certainty. They need things to go their way. And the moment that attachment is threatened, calm disappears. Because attachment creates vulnerability. The more attached you are to outcomes, the easier you are to destabilize. That's not philosophy. That's mechanics. If someone can control how you feel by threatening an outcome, they control you. You have a choice. You can stay present without being possessed. Or you can let outcomes own your emotional state. Say it clearly. I stay present, not possessed. Possession is emotional hostage-taking. Presence is emotional sovereignty. Most people live possessed. They say, I'll be calm if this works out. I'll be okay once this ends. I can relax after the result. That means calm is conditional. And conditional calm is fragile. Detachment removes the condition. It says, I will execute well regardless of outcome. I will stay regulated regardless of response. I will remain disciplined regardless of uncertainty. That's power. High performers understand this instinctively. They care deeply about the work, but they don't emotionally cling to the result. They focus on process, behavior, execution, because outcomes are delayed feedback. Process is controllable reality. That's the key. Attachment pulls attention forward into imagined futures. Detachment anchors attention in the present moment. And calm only exists in the present. You cannot be calm while emotionally living in outcomes that haven't happened yet. Anxiety is attachment to the future. Regret is attachment to the past. Detachment dissolves both. Not by avoidance, but by presence. I stay present, not possessed. This doesn't mean you lower standards. It means you stop emotionally bargaining with results. You stop saying, this has to work. You stop saying, I need this to happen, because need creates tension, and tension creates mistakes. When you need an outcome, your behavior changes. You rush. You force. You overcorrect. That's how attachment sabotages execution. Detachment does the opposite. It relaxes the nervous system while maintaining focus. It allows precision under pressure. That's calm strength. Most people confuse emotional intensity with commitment. They think caring means being emotionally volatile. That's backwards. Volatility reduces effectiveness. The most committed people are often the most emotionally stable, because stability allows sustained effort. You don't need their permission to detach. You don't need to explain it. You don't need to justify calmness. Detachment is internal, invisible, quiet. It shows up in how you breathe, how you wait, how you respond, not in what you announce. That's the discipline. When someone criticizes you and you detach, you hear information without absorbing insult. When plans change and you detach, you adapt without panic. When outcomes are uncertain and you detach, you continue executing without emotional drain. Still present, not possessed. That's the balance. Most people swing between extremes, either emotionally invested to the point of anxiety, or emotionally numb to protect themselves. Both are failures of control. Detachment is the middle path. Engaged, focused, unentangled. That's why it's hard. It requires emotional maturity. And maturity is trained. You train detachment by noticing when you're gripping too tightly. Notice the tension in your body when outcomes matter too much. Notice the urgency in your thoughts. Notice the emotional bargaining. That's attachment speaking. When you notice it, you don't suppress it. You release it. You remind yourself, I control my behavior, not the outcome. That's the key. Control what's yours. Release what isn't. This single shift removes enormous pressure. Pressure you didn't need to carry. Most stress isn't caused by workload. It's caused by emotional attachment to results you can't fully control. Detach and the weight drops. Execution improves. Calm returns. Not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped clinging. I stay present, not possessed. Say it again, slowly. I stay present, not possessed. This identity changes how you move through life. You listen better because you're not waiting to defend. You think clearer because you're not rushing to secure outcomes. You respond calmer because nothing is pulling you emotionally off-center. Detachment gives you space, and space gives you choice. Choice is power. Most people live without space. Every stimulus demands reaction. Every outcome threatens identity. That's exhausting. Detachment simplifies everything. Do the work. Control the controllables. Let outcomes reveal themselves. That's discipline. And here's the paradox most people miss. Detachment often improves outcomes, because relaxed focus beats tense effort every time. People perform better when they're not emotionally strangling the result. That's not theory. That's observed reality. So the next time you feel yourself gripping, pause, breathe, ask yourself one question. Am I present, or am I possessed by this outcome? If you're possessed, release, not by disengaging, but by returning attention to the next correct action. That's detachment. And once detachment becomes your default, something important happens. External events lose their ability to pull you around emotionally. But there's still one thing left to master. Your body. Because calm is not just mental. It's physiological. If your nervous system can't hold stress, no mindset will save you. You've learned how to stay calm mentally. You've learned how to detach emotionally. Now it's time to build the physical foundation that makes calm sustainable. Chapter 7. Build a nervous system that can hold stress. Most people try to think their way into calm. They analyze. They rationalize. They repeat affirmations. And then pressure hits. And the body panics anyway. That's the mistake. Calm is not just mental. Calm is physiological. Your thoughts do not run the show under stress. Your nervous system does. That's the key. If your body cannot hold stress, your mind will not stay disciplined, no matter how strong your intentions are. This is why people know better and still lose control. Because knowledge doesn't regulate heart rate. Knowledge doesn't slow breathing. Knowledge doesn't relax muscle tension. The body decides first. And if the body is untrained, emotion spikes before logic even arrives. You have a choice. You can keep trying to outthink stress, or you can train your nervous system to handle it. High performers do the second. They understand a simple truth. A regulated body creates a regulated mind. That's the foundation. My body supports my discipline. Say it again. My body supports my discipline. Let's be clear. If your breathing is shallow, your thinking will be frantic. If your posture collapses, your confidence will follow. If your movements are rushed, your decisions will be impulsive. The body is not neutral. It is constantly signaling the brain. And most people are sending panic signals all day long, without realizing it. Fast breathing, tight shoulders, clenched jaw, restless movement. These are not harmless habits. They are instructions. They tell the nervous system, something is wrong. And once the nervous system believes that, emotion escalates automatically. That's why calm collapses so fast under pressure. Not because you're weak, but because your body was never trained to stay steady. You don't need their permission to train this. You don't need special conditions. You need awareness and repetition. That's the key. Start with breathing. When stress hits, most people breathe faster. That's instinct. Discipline means doing the opposite. Slower breaths, deeper exhales, longer pauses. Not because it feels good, but because it tells the nervous system, we're safe enough to stay in control. Breath is the fastest way to influence state. And yet, most people ignore it completely. They wait for calm to arrive, instead of producing it mechanically. That's backwards. Calm is an action before it is a feeling. Next, posture. Under pressure, people collapse. They hunch. They shrink. They fold inward. That posture tells the brain. Defensive mode. Calm posture does the opposite. Chest open. Spine tall. Head level. Not rigid. Stable. Posture is silent communication to yourself. It says, I can hold this. That's discipline in physical form. My body supports my discipline. Next, pace. Rushing is the enemy of calm. When stress appears, people speed up. They talk faster. They move faster. They decide faster. Speed feels productive. It's usually reactive. Calm pace is deliberate. You move slightly slower than the situation demands. You speak slightly slower than emotion urges. You pause slightly longer than feels comfortable. That slowdown interrupts panic. That's the key. You don't eliminate stress by stopping life. You absorb stress by expanding capacity. A trained nervous system doesn't eliminate pressure. Contains it. That's strength. Most people try to reduce stress. High performers increase tolerance. They expose the body to controlled stress and practice staying regulated inside it. Cold exposure, hard workouts, difficult conversations, silence under tension, not for toughness theater, but for nervous system conditioning. Because the body learns by experience, not explanation. Each time you stay calm while your heart rate is elevated, the nervous system updates its map. It learns, we can survive this without panic. And once it learns that, emotional spikes lose intensity. That's how regulation is built. Not by comfort, by exposure with control. That's the discipline. My body supports my discipline. Most people do the opposite. They avoid stress whenever possible. They seek comfort. They escape discomfort. And then they wonder why small pressures overwhelm them. You don't build strength by avoiding weight. You don't build calm by avoiding stress. You train calm by staying regulated inside stress. That means letting the heart race, without letting behavior race. Letting adrenaline show up, without letting emotion drive. That separation is mastery. And mastery is physical before it is philosophical. This also means you must respect recovery. A burned-out nervous system cannot stay calm. Sleep, nutrition, stillness. These aren't luxuries. They're structural supports. Discipline without recovery becomes fragility. That's the key. Calm is not forcing yourself to endure endlessly. It's knowing when to load and when to restore. High performers manage both. They push when it's time to train. They rest when it's time to rebuild. That balance keeps the nervous system resilient. My body supports my discipline. When the body is trained, something important happens. Emotion still appears, but it doesn't spike uncontrollably. Stress still arrives, but it doesn't hijack behavior. Calm becomes available faster. Recovery becomes quicker. You don't stay calm because you're special. You stay calm because your system knows how. That's identity. And identity removes effort. Calm stops being something you try to do and becomes something you default to. That's the goal. You have a choice. You can keep blaming stress for your reactions, or you can train your body to hold more. Start small. The next time pressure hits, slow your breathing before you slow your thoughts. Fix posture before you fix the problem. Reduce pace before you respond. These are not psychological tricks. They are physiological commands. And physiology listens immediately. My body supports my discipline. Say it until it becomes true. Because once your body can hold stress, the external world loses another way to pull you. But there's still one illusion left to break. The belief that chaos itself is the enemy. It's not. Chaos is simply the environment where discipline is tested. And once you understand that, pressure transforms into something else entirely. You've built the nervous system. Now it's time to change how you see the battlefield. Chapter 8. Chaos is the test, not the threat. Most people see chaos as the enemy. They think unpredictability is the problem. They think disorder is what breaks them. That belief keeps them reactive. Because chaos is not the threat. Chaos is the test. That's the key. Chaos exists to reveal whether you are internally governed or externally controlled. It does not show up to defeat you. It shows up to measure you. When plans change, when pressure spikes, when variables multiply, chaos is asking one question: who is in charge here? Most people answer without realizing it. They let chaos decide their mood, their pace, their tone, their behavior. That's not bad luck. That's failed governance. You have a choice. You can treat chaos like an invasion, or you can treat it like training. High performers choose training. They understand that predictability builds comfort, but unpredictability builds control. Calm turns unpredictable situations into controlled environments, not by controlling events, but by controlling response. That's the distinction. Chaos outside is unavoidable. Chaos inside is optional. Say it again. Chaos outside is unavoidable. Chaos inside is optional. Most people collapse the two. They think because life is chaotic, they must be too. That assumption is never questioned. And it becomes identity. Calm people don't eliminate chaos. They isolate it. They keep it external. They don't let shifting circumstances invade their internal state. That's discipline. Chaos trains me. When chaos arrives, calm people slow down. Not because things are easy, but because speed without clarity multiplies error. They narrow focus. They simplify decisions. They return to fundamentals. Breathing, posture, tone, timing. While others panic, they stabilize. And stability changes everything. In chaos, most people chase certainty. They demand answers. They rush decisions. That urgency makes chaos worse. Calm removes urgency. Calm says, we will move when we can see. That pause feels uncomfortable to reactive people. But it's the moment where advantage is created. Chaos reveals who can wait. Waiting is not passive. Waiting is disciplined restraint. That's the key. Chaos also exposes emotional governance. When things go wrong, do you tighten or soften? Do you narrow or scatter? Do you react or respond? These patterns show up instantly. Chaos doesn't give you time to perform. It shows your defaults, and defaults are trained. That's why chaos is useful. It strips away stories. It removes preparation, tests what remains. Chaos trains me. Most people try to control chaos by controlling people, outcomes, or information. That always fails, because chaos cannot be controlled externally, but response can be controlled internally. Once that clicks, everything shifts. You stop fighting unpredictability and start using it. Calm in chaos creates contrast. While others are loud, you're quiet. While others rush, you're steady. While others scatter, you focus. That contrast becomes leadership. Not positional leadership, behavioral leadership. People look to the one who isn't panicking, because calm signals safety, and safety allows thinking. That's how calm turns chaos into a controlled environment. The environment doesn't change. Your influence within it does. That's the discipline. Chaos trains me. This mindset removes fear, not because chaos disappears, but because its role is redefined. Chaos stops being something to avoid and becomes something to expect. Expected things lose emotional impact. When you expect chaos, you prepare differently. You build margins. You slow decisions. You detach from outcomes. You don't need their permission to stay calm in chaos. You don't need perfect information. You don't need guarantees. You need internal order. And internal order is built long before chaos arrives. That's why training matters. You don't practice calm during chaos. You rely on calm trained before chaos. Chaos just tests it. Pressure exposes training gaps. Chaos confirms training depth. That's the key. Most people want chaos to end so they can relax. Calm people relax inside chaos. That's mastery. This doesn't mean you enjoy chaos. It means you don't fear it. Fear makes chaos louder. Calm makes it manageable. Chaos feeds on emotional energy. When you stop feeding it, it shrinks. Not externally, internally. And internal shrinkage is all that matters. Chaos trains me. Say it until it rewires your response. Chaos trains me. The next time things unravel, don't complain. Don't rush. Don't escalate. Ground yourself. Slow your breathing. Lower your voice. Reduce inputs. Then act. One step at a time. Calm doesn't solve everything instantly. It solves the next correct action. And the next correct action is always available. If you're not panicking, that's the key. Chaos is not personal. It's procedural. It arrives to see if you can stay governed when variables multiply. If you can, you pass. If you can't, you learn where to train. Either way, chaos gives you feedback. That's why it's valuable. You're no longer trying to avoid life. You're preparing to meet it. Calm turns chaos from threat to test. And tests build identity. You've learned how to stay calm. You've learned how to respond. You've learned to stop negotiating with emotion. You've learned what pressure exposes. You've learned the power of silence. You've learned detachment. You've trained your nervous system. You've reframed chaos. Now there's one more shift left. Because calm is not just internal. It's communicative. Your calm doesn't just help you. It affects everyone around you. And when you understand that, calm becomes more than self-control. It becomes influence. Chapter 9. Your calm is louder than any reaction. Most people think authority comes from volume, from force, from dominance, from making sure everyone knows how they feel. That's wrong. Authority comes from restraint. That's the key. Emotional restraint communicates power without explanation. It signals control. It signals confidence. It signals internal governance. And it does all of that silently. My calm speaks for me. Most people try to win moments by reacting harder. They raise their voice. They sharpen their tone. They escalate emotion. And in doing so, they reveal something important. They're affected. The moment you show you're emotionally affected, you give the situation leverage over you. Calm takes that leverage away. You don't need their permission to stay composed. You don't need to correct every misinterpretation. You don't need to prove your strength emotionally. Your calm already does that. That's the key. Think about confrontations, arguments, high-pressure exchanges. Who feels more in control? The person reacting loudly or the person staying steady? Everyone knows the answer. Calm unsettles emotional opponents more than confrontation ever could. Why? Because emotion expects emotion in return. When it doesn't get it, it loses footing. Emotional people rely on escalation. They push buttons to get reactions. They create chaos to gain control. Calm breaks that pattern. It refuses to play. And when someone can't pull you into their emotional frame, they lose influence. That's power. My calm speaks for me. This doesn't mean you're passive. It means you're unmovable. There's a difference. Passivity avoids engagement. Calm presence dominates it. You stay present. You stay attentive. You stay firm. But you don't spike emotionally. That combination is rare. And rarity creates authority. Most people can't do this because they confuse calm with submission. They think if they don't react, they're being weak. That belief is emotional immaturity. Strength is not loud. Strength is controlled. Anyone can react. Very few can restrain. Restraint requires confidence in self-governance. That's why it communicates so loudly. Stillness protects power. When you don't react, people fill the silence themselves. They reveal urgency. They reveal insecurity. They reveal motive. While you stay grounded, calm creates asymmetry. You see more because you're not busy defending your ego. You hear more because you're not preparing a rebuttal. You decide better because you're not emotionally hijacked. That's the advantage. My calm speaks for me. In negotiations, calm forces the other side to overplay. In arguments, calm exposes irrationality. In chaos, calm becomes leadership. Not because you claimed authority, but because you embodied it. People follow the nervous system that feels safest. Calm creates safety, and safety attracts influence. This is especially important in moments where others expect reaction. Provocation, disrespect, pressure tactics. These are designed to pull emotion out of you. If they succeed, they control the tempo. If they fail, they lose momentum. Calm is denial of access. You don't give them your internal state. You don't give them timing. You don't give them escalation. You stay steady. That steadiness forces recalibration. That's the key. Most people underestimate how unsettling calm really is. Emotion wants mirroring. It wants validation. It wants engagement. Calm gives none of that. It stands there, unbothered, unrushed, unimpressed. That absence of reaction is louder than any argument. It says, "This doesn't move me." And when something doesn't move you, can't control you, my calm speaks for me. This applies everywhere. At work, in relationships, in conflict, in uncertainty. When you stop reacting, dynamics change. People test you less. Situations escalate slower. Respect increases quietly. Not because you demanded it, because calm signals boundaries without words. Most people talk about boundaries. Calm is a boundary. It says, "You don't get access to my nervous system." That's authority. You have a choice. The next time someone pushes, don't push back emotionally. Hold eye contact. Slow your breathing. Lower your voice. Let the moment hang. That pause will do more than any response ever could. Because most people don't know what to do when emotion isn't returned. They expected friction. They got silence. And silence forces self-confrontation. Stillness protects power. This doesn't mean you never assert yourself. It means when you do, your words land harder. Because they're not diluted by emotion. Calm speech cuts cleaner. Calm decisions hold longer. Calm presence intimidates without threat. That's real influence. Most people are noisy and ignored. Calm people are quiet and watched. That's the difference. My calm speaks for me. You may notice discomfort when you first practice this. Pull to explain. Pull to defend. A pull to react. That pull is old conditioning. Don't obey it. The moment you resist that urge, you feel power return. Not power over others, power over yourself. And self-mastery is the only power that scales. Once you realize this, calm becomes strategic. You stop wasting energy on emotional theatrics. You stop engaging in battles that don't serve you. You conserve force. And conserved force is dangerous. That's why calm people are underestimated. Until they act. They don't broadcast. They don't posture. They move when it matters. And when they do, there's no doubt. Calm didn't make them weak. It made them precise. My calm speaks for me. Say it until it's automatic. My calm speaks for me. When calm becomes your language, you no longer need reactions to be seen. Your presence communicates everything. And once calm becomes identity, there's one final step. Because calm isn't something you visit occasionally. It's something you live from consistently, not situationally, not conditionally, as default. That's the final discipline. You've learned how calm works. You've learned how it influences others. Now it's time to lock it in permanently. To make calm who you are, not something you try to access. You've built the tools. You've practiced the behaviors. Now it's time to turn calm into identity. Chapter 10. Make calmness your default identity. Most people treat calm like a technique. Something they try when things go wrong. Something they access only when they remember. That's why it fails them. Calm that is optional is fragile. Calm that is conditional disappears. That's the key. Calm must become automatic. Not situational. Not dependent on mood, outcome, or environment. Automatic. Because identity outlasts motivation. Motivation fades. Identity executes. Calm people don't try to stay calm. They are calm. And that difference changes everything. You have a choice. You can keep asking, how do I calm down right now? Or you can decide, this is who I am, regardless. One is effort. The other is identity. Effort breaks under pressure. Identity holds. That's the discipline. Most people wait for emotional permission to be calm. They say, once this settles, I'll relax. Once this works out, I'll breathe. That means calm is always postponed. Identity removes postponement. When calm is identity, it shows up first, not last. Say it clearly. I am internally governed. Internal governance means your internal state does not negotiate with external chaos. Noise doesn't decide your tone. Pressure doesn't decide your pace. Other people don't decide your reactions. You do. And once you decide that, behavior follows. That's the key. Identity simplifies life. When calm is who you are, there's no internal debate. No arguing with feelings. No bargaining with stress. You don't ask, should I react? You already know the answer. You don't ask, can I handle this? Your behavior answers for you. Most people are exhausted because they renegotiate calm every day. Identity removes that cost. You decide once and execute forever. Calm becomes default. Default is powerful. Defaults run automatically when attention is limited. And attention is always limited under pressure. That's why identity matters most when stakes are high. When pressure hits, you don't have time to remember techniques. You fall back on who you believe you are. If you believe you are reactive, you react. If you believe you are calm, you stabilize. Simple. I am internally governed. This identity is built through consistency, not intensity. Not dramatic moments. Not breakthroughs. Quiet repetition. every time you slow your breath, every time you pause before speaking, every time you refuse to react. You cast a vote, and identity is just the accumulation of votes over time. One vote doesn't matter. 1,000 do. That's the key. Most people sabotage identity by being inconsistent. They're calm when it's easy, reactive when it's hard. That inconsistency tells the nervous system, calm is optional. You don't want optional. You want inevitable. That means calm when you're tired, calm when you're criticized, calm when outcomes are uncertain, especially then, because identity is tested where it costs you something. If calm only shows up when there's no cost, it's not identity, it's convenience. You don't need their permission to be calm. You don't need ideal conditions. You don't need to feel good. You need alignment. Alignment between who you say you are and how you behave. That alignment creates trust with yourself. And self-trust is the foundation of calm. When you trust yourself to stay regulated, you stop fearing situations. You stop anticipating collapse. Because you know who you'll be, regardless. That's freedom. I am internally governed. This doesn't mean you never feel emotion. It means emotion no longer defines you. Anger can pass through without sticking. Fear can speak without commanding. Stress can arrive without destabilizing. You feel but you don't follow. That separation is identity. Most people are their emotions. Calm people experience them. That's the distinction. And once that distinction is clear, calm becomes sustainable. You're no longer fighting emotion. You're no longer suppressing it. You're governing it. Governance is quiet, unseen, consistent. That's why it works. Most people want calm as an outcome. You build calm as an identity. Outcomes fluctuate. Identity doesn't. That's the key. Ask yourself this question honestly. When pressure hits, who do I become? Not who you want to be. Not who you are sometimes. Who you default to. Whatever the answer is, that's your current identity. And identities can be changed. Not through affirmations. Through behavior. Decide today that calm is non-negotiable. Not because life will cooperate, but because you will. The next time something pulls you, and it will, slow down, breathe, respond deliberately, not to prove anything, not to win the moment, but to reinforce who you are. Every calm response strengthens identity. Every reactive moment weakens it. You already know this. Now you live it. I am internally governed. Say it again. Without emotion. Without intensity. I am internally governed. That sentence is not motivation. It's a standard. And standards don't argue. They execute. Once calm becomes your standard, life stops feeling like a series of threats. It becomes a series of tests you're prepared for. Not because you control everything, but because you control yourself. And self-control is the only control that lasts. This is the discipline of staying calm. When everything tries to pull you, not occasionally, not when it's easy, always, because that's who you are now. Internally governed. Staying calm is not weakness. It is not avoidance. It is dominance over yourself when everything tries to pull you apart. Anyone can stay composed when life is easy. Very few can remain steady when emotions spike, pressure tightens, and outcomes feel uncertain. That is where this discipline matters. From this point forward, you don't give control to stress. You don't outsource your behavior to emotion. You don't let chaos decide who you become. Your challenge is simple but demanding. The next time life pulls at you, do nothing emotionally. Hold your breath. Hold your posture. Hold your discipline. Because the person who stays calm when everything pulls them is the person who always decides the outcome.